Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Richard Talk. Today we are talking about Poor Charlie's Almanack. Poor Charlie's Almanack. Ever heard of the billionaire who loves talking about dancing bees and zombie ants? Sounds strange, right? Today we are diving into the world of Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner and one of the wisest investors ever. In the next few minutes, you will hear how a 99-year-old, yes, 99, turned humble wisdom into immense wealth, all while avoiding the spotlight. From a bee that did an incoherent dance to an ant that got dragged out of its home by its own friends, Charlie's stories pack powerful lessons. So stay tuned because by the end, you might just see the world a bit differently and have a few great tips for life and investing. So let's start with the obvious question. Who is Charlie Munger? Imagine Warren Buffett, the famous Oracle of Omaha. Now imagine Buffett's closest friend, working quietly behind the scenes. That's Charlie. In fact, Charlie Munger was the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's company for decades. He was born in 1924 and lived until 2023, nearly a century of wisdom and wit. Unlike Buffett, Charlie kept a low profile, so low that you might not recognize him on the streets. But make no mistake, his influence on Buffett and on investing is legendary. Charlie's background is quite surprising. He wasn't always an investor. He started as a lawyer after attending Harvard Law School. It was only later that he switched careers to run an investment partnership and eventually joined forces with Buffett. Together, they grew Berkshire Hathaway into the juggernaut. Buffett often credits Charlie for shaping Berkshire's strategy with fresh ideas. For example, Charlie pushed Buffett to move beyond buying just the cheap companies, the so-called cigar butt investing, and instead focus on great businesses, even if the price was fair. This was a game changer for Berkshire. Yeah, Charlie never sought fame. He would rather sit in a quiet room reading a book than do TV interviews. He even jokes that his role at Berkshire is just architectural, basically designing ideas and leaving the public spotlight to Buffett. Charlie once said he had the best seat that wise men can have, the seat of onlooker in life's circus, enjoying the show without needing to be the ringmaster. So while Buffett became a household name, Charlie remained the unsung hero, content with his books, his poker-faced humor, and of course, his daily dose of Coca-Cola. He and Buffett really love their Coke. So how does Charlie Munger invest? In one word, simply, he believes in keeping things basic and playing the long game. Charlie often stresses that patience is the key. In his own words, the big money is not in the buying or selling, but in the waiting. Think about it. It's not about frantic trading. It's about sitting tight on great investments and letting time do the work. Charlie and Buffett have held stocks like Coca-Cola and See's candies for decades, rarely selling. Just like a fine wine, their investment mature over time. Another pillar of Munger's philosophy is buying quality. He would rather pay a fair price for an excellent company than the cheap price for the crummy one. This was a shift from Buffett's early style, and it came largely from Charlie's influence. They look for business with strong fundamental, honest management, and the ability to generate cash year after year. Once they find them, they load up and hold on tight. Now, Charlie also has candid advice for everyday investors like us. Index funds. He openly admits that most people, and even most professionals, struggle to beat the stock markets. As he noted at Berkshire meeting, Stockbrokers in total will do so poorly that index funds will do better for the average investors. In other words, instead of paying high fees for active management, one can simply buy a low-cost S&P 500 index funds and chill. Over time, you will likely outperform the majority of high-fee, hyperactive traders. Charlie's not shy about this point. He even calls the investment management industry out for often adding no value overall. That's blunt honesty. That blunt honesty is classic Munger. So Charlie is also a big fan of compounding, letting your money grow on itself, like a snowball rolling down a hill. One of his famous quips is that his life success comes from living long and avoiding doing anything stupid. Part of not doing anything stupid is not interrupting compounding. He advises, once you have a good thing, don't mess it up with overactivity or silly risks. Just to let your wealth compound quietly. And speaking of avoiding stupidity, Charlie's golden rule is avoid what causes failure. This ties into how he thinks, which we will explore next. But in investing terms, it means avoiding debt. Yeah, Charlie Munger, he hates borrowing money to buy stocks and avoiding get rich quick schemes and not following the crowd off a cliff. He would rather be a little cautious and sane than chase the hottest new trend. So then case in points, Charlie and Buffett famously avoid speculative frenzies, whether it was the dot-com bubble or more recently things like cryptocurrency. Charlie stays skeptical. He often says, if you don't understand something, don't invest. Sounds simple, but in a world where everyone's shouting, buy this now, it's wisdom worth remembering. So in summary, Charlie's investment recipe is keep it simple, bet on high quality businesses, be super patient, and know your limits. It's not very flashy, which is exactly why it works. Now, here's where Charlie's really stands out, how he thinks. He's not just an investor, he's a self-taught philosopher of practical life. Charlie loves using what he calls mental models, basically big ideas from different disciplines like philosophy, history, math, engineering, biology, etc., that help explain how the world works. He has built a whole lattice work of these models in his mind, and he uses them to solve problems or make decisions. It's like having a toolbox with tools from physics, psychology, economics, and more, and knowing just the right one to pull out in each situation. One of Charlie's favorite thinking techniques is something called inversion, or what he jokingly calls backward thinking. In Charlie's words, he looked for insights by inversion, following the advice of the great algebraist Jacobi. Invert, always invert. What does that mean? It means instead of always asking, how do I achieve success? Charlie will ask, how could I guaranteedly mess this up? And then avoid these things. So it's a bit like saying, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. In fact, that's a famous Munger line. Focus on avoiding the dumb mistakes, and you will likely do just fine. For example, rather than thinking what stocks will make me rich, Charlie might first think what habits would make me go broke, like overtrading, using leverage, following tips from Reddit, etc. And then not do these one. By eliminating negative, you clear a path for the positive to take care of itself. So this backward thinking approaches force you to be objective. Charlie knows that if you challenge your own ideas and try to disprove them, you can overcome a lot of biases. Most of the people do the opposite. They confirm their initial beliefs. So Charlie trains himself to do the inverted thing, which is assume your idea might be wrong and test it and be delighted if you find out why. It's like a built-in error correcting process for your brain. So another mental model Charlie is known for is the circle of competence. And this one he shares with Buffett. The idea is simple. Know what you know and know what you don't know. Charlie stays with the areas that he understands well. Is his circle, of course, and he doesn't mind not venturing out of it. He would say it's better to be consistently good in a small circle than try to be a know-it-all and fall on your face. This humility in knowledge is a huge part of his success, and it's something he encourages everyone to cultivate. Charlie also applies mental models from physics, like momentum or critical mass, and engineering, like a margin of safety, building a bridge that can hold far for weights than needed, just in case. So blend that with economics, supply and demand, opportunity cost, and the biology, like adaptation, survival of the fittest in business. And you will have a potent mix. So he's basically a cross-disciplinary learning machine. He once said, spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up. That daily learning habits means by the end of the year, you have gained a lot of wisdom. One of Charlie Munger's most famous talks, and the chapter in Poor Charlie's Almanack, is the psychology of human misjudgment. In it, he explored 25 cognitive biases that lead us humans to make silly mistakes. But Charlie, being Charlie, doesn't just list the biases in a dry way. He uses some pretty wild stories to illustrate them. So let's talk about two of my favorites, which we teased at the start, the bee dance and the ant corpse. First, the honey bee. Charlie described how the honey bee goes out from the hive, finds some sweet nectar, and then comes back to perform a dance. That tells the other bees where the food is. This is a real thing in nature, and bee communicate through a kind of waggle dance. Now here's the twist. A clever scientist once put the nectar straight up, high above the beehive, something that never happens in nature. Nectar is usually out across the land, not directly above. And the poor bee had no programmed dance to communicate. It literally didn't evolve a way to say, the food is above our heads. So when it returned, the bee didn't shrunk and say, I don't know. Instead, it launched into the unconfused, incoherent dance that made no sense at all. It just had to do something, even if the dance was pure nonsense. The Charlie's punchlines, humans do this too. He calls it the say something syndrome. In business and life, people are pressed for the answer or a decision. They often give any answer rather than admit, I don't know. Just like that bee, we sometimes would rather sprout gibberish than appear ignorant or stay silent. Charlie jokes that in his life, he's dealt with many human equivalents of that confused honeybee. This is a warning to be careful with confident assertions. Just because someone is dancing doesn't mean they actually know what they are doing. In companies, endless meetings and PowerPoints can be like incoherent bee dances. Lots of motion, no meaning. Charlie advises leaders to structure organizations so that this noise doesn't lead to bad decisions. So, in other words, don't let people make choices just to look busy when they actually don't have a clue. Now, the end story. This one is even stranger. E.O. Wilson, a famous Harvard biologist, once did a classic experiment. He took the pheromone, which is the scent chemical that ants emit when they die, and dabbed it into in on the live ant. What do you think it will happen? The other ant settling dead on their body immediately grabbed that live ant and marched it out of the hive as if it were a corpse. The poor ant kicked and struggled. Hey guys, I'm alive, yo! But its comrades were programmed to move a body that smelled like death. No ifs or that buts. So such is the power of little hardwire brains. Only after the zombie ants managed to clean off the fake pheromone did it safely return, presumably thinking, wow, rude. So Charlie uses this story to illustrate how fixed action patterns can lead to folly. Ants have only a handful of responses in the brain. Follow the pheromone rules blindly. So in this case, humans, of course, have much more complex brains, but we are not immune to knee-jerk reactions. We too have mental programs that usually work fine but can misfire badly. Think about social proof, for instance. If everyone around us is doing something, we feel an impulse to do it too. So most time it keeps society cohesive. Sometimes it makes us join in foolish or dangerous fates, like financial bubbles or harmful groupthink. Our brain says, others are doing it, so it must be right. A bit like those ants saying, smell like Bob is dead, so he must be. Let's haul him out, even when Bob is screaming otherwise. The Charlie's lesson: recognize these psychological tendencies. You don't become a victim of them. As he put it, man's brain often operates counterproductively, just like the ants. When faced with situations it isn't evolved to handle. He listed dozens of human biases, from reward bias to denial, excessive self regard, availability bias, and so on. For each, he has vivid examples and sometimes jokes. Cheeky example: Charlie likes to mention how envy is a stupid sin. He said, envy, one of the seven deadly sins, is the only one you can have any fun at. It's a funny but true. Gluttony, lust, etc. at least have some immediate pleasure. However, ruinous long-term envy makes you miserable for no good reason. So knowing that, Charlie's advice is basically just don't go there. He intentionally cultivated an attitude of reinforcing in others' success. And guess what? It makes life happier and probably help him make better decisions without the cloud of envy. So these stories and tendencies are not just for trivia. Charlie uses them in investing all the time. For instance, when others are euphoric about the stock, Charlie is on guard. Or when a CEO is surrounded by yes men afraid to give bad news. Charlie knows that company's in trouble. The leader is in a cocoon of unreality. So by being aware of these psychological pitfalls, he navigates around them, much like a ship avoiding hidden rocks under the water. Charlie Munger's is a treasure trove of one-liner and anecdotes. His style is blunt, often humorous, and extremely quotable. We have already touched on a few gems, but let's highlight some memorable Mungerisms that capture the essence of wisdom. All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I will never go there. This funny line sums up his inversion principle. Figure out what to avoid. It's Charlie's Forbes way to saying preventing stupidity is easier than seeking brilliance. And the other is the big money is not in the buying and selling, but in the waiting. We mentioned this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Charlie is the ultimate patient investor. He likens investing to watching paint dry. Nothing exciting. But if you are patient, you woke up one day and boom, the paint dry and the investment has doubled. Patience, patience, patience. That's how fortunes are made. The other is invert, always invert. Originally a quote from mathematical Carl Jacobi. Charlie adopted it as a mantra. It reminds us to look at problems from the opposite angle. If you have a challenge, try asking, what if I wanted to achieve the exact opposite of my goal? What would I do? That often illuminates the path not to take, and then by elimination, the better path forward. The other is a lot of people with high IQs are terrible investors because they have got terrible temperament. Charlie hammers on the importance of emotional discipline. You can be a genius, but if you panic when the market dips or get greedy at the top, you will underperform. Keeping an even keel, not getting swept up in fear or euphoria, is more than half the battle in investing. And the other is, it's not greed that drives the world, but envy. This provocative claim highlights how much human behavior is driven by comparison. As we discussed, envy is a pernicious motivator. Charlie encourages focusing on your own progress and well being rather than constantly measuring against others, both for sanity and sound decisions. The other is the antidote quotes. Charlie has a few prescriptions for avoiding folly. For example, he says if you reliably temper your desires and avoid self pity and envy, you'll have an enormous advantage in life. One he often mentions: never feel sorry for yourself. No matter how bad things get, self pity is counterproductive. Charlie speaks from experience. He endured personal tragedies, like the loss of a son to leukemia, for one, and even blindness in one eye. Yet he practiced stoicism in focusing on what can be done, not what's unfair. This resilience feeds into his rational decision making. Is one to solve the next problem. And the other is fish where the fish are. This is Charlie's way of saying go where the opportunities are. It sounds obvious, but many miss it. In investing, it meant for him and Buffett focus on business you truly understand and that have a fertile field for growth. Don't waste the time in areas that are overfished or barren just because everyone else is there. This quote also reflects Charlie's partiality. He's not about complexity for ego's sake. He just wants results. If the fish are biting in a simple pond, he will happily cast his line there. Throughout Poor Charlie's Almanack, you'll find many more such nuggets, often delivered with Charlie's trademark dry wit. Reading it feels like sitting at the feet of a really wise grandfather who has seen it all. One moment he will reference Ben Franklin's or algebra, the next he will crack a joke about how officials have wonderfully fuzzy minds when it comes to something their pay depends on. A jab at how incentives can blind rationality. So, in conclusion, now after all this talk of wisdom, it's important to note Charlie Munger is remarkably humble. He often insists that he's not a genius, just a guy who learned from his mistakes and read a lot of books. He freely credits others, for instance. He praises Benjamin Franklin who is the original inspiration for the Almanack format, and he lauds Buffett continuously. When asked about Berkshire's success, Charlie might say it's mostly because he teamed up with Warren and stuck to basic principles. No hype, no magic, just common sense. And despite shunning fame, Charlie's influence is enormous. The book for Charlie's Almanack itself has a cult following. One friend even said that this book is the only one that will add at least 2 million to your lifetime earning because its ideas are that powerful. That might be a tongue in cheek way to put it, but countless investors and entrepreneurs swear by Charlie's lessons on rationality and clear thinking. He's influenced people to be more ethical in business, to be lifelong learners, and to cut through BS when making decisions. Charlie Munger's lived to the age of 99, and up until very end, he was still attending board meetings and dispensing wisdoms with a twinkle in his eye. When asked at one of his last public Q&A session how he would like to be remembered, he chuckled and said, "I don't need to be remembered. I would like it if Berkshire continues to do well." Classic Charlie, right? Thinking not of legacy tributes, but of practical results for the company and people he cares about. If there's one image of Charlie Munger's, I'll leave you with it. It's this: a wise elder, book in hand, calmly surviving the madness of the world, and smiling because he's seen these patterns before. His life teaches us that you don't need to be flamboyant to win. You can quietly, consistently do the right things. Read, think, avoid stupidity. Seize a few great opportunities and achieve something extraordinary. And with that, let's wrap up our journey through poor Charlie's Almanack. Charlie Munger's wisdom is proof that good ideas are timeless. Apply whether you are investing, managing business, or just trying to live a decent life. If you enjoy these stories and want to keep growing wiser day by day, you are exactly the kind of person Charlie hoped to reach. Before you go, here's a quick call to action. If you find value in this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to Richard Talk. For more insight, we have a lot more in store, from legendary investors to big ideas that can change the way you think. Just join our community of curious minds. As Charlie might say, go to bed a little smarter than when you woke up. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.